Welcome to Hope in the Face of Cancer, where we share real stories of courageous people in their cancer journey. Today, we are honored to have Stephen Brown with us, a 19-year survivor of chronic lymphatic leukemia, or CLL. Stephen is not only an Ironman competitor and former college soccer player, but also a dedicated advocate for others facing CLL. Through his work with the CLL Society, he supports patients navigating their own diagnoses, offering guidance, encouragement, and hope. At 45 years old, while in peak physical condition, Stephen received a diagnosis that completely shocked him. But instead of letting cancer define him, he used his endurance mindset to help him push through treatment. Today, we'll dive into Stephen's experience, the challenges, the mindset shifts, and the unexpected gifts that came from his cancer journey. His story is one of resilience, purpose, and the power of setting goals, even in life's toughest moments. Stephen, welcome to the show. We are so happy to have you.
Thank you very much, Darcy. I'm very happy to be here and happy to be here.
Wonderful. Well, before we dive into the cancer journey part of your story, you've got such a fascinating background. I would love for our audience to hear a little bit about what your life looked like before your diagnosis in 2006. I understand you were quite the athlete.
Yeah, and I really always have been. So I grew up one of those kids, that would leave the house early in the morning on a Saturday on my bike with a basketball wedged in their bike frame and a baseball glove over their handlebar and just be gone all day, playing on the playground and doing whatever, and played multiple sports all through school. Ended up going to a local college on a soccer scholarship and continued to play soccer at post-college. And then I got lured into the world of multi-sports and triathlon and Ironman racing and
Wow.
marathoning and running, and that was something that was just a perfect match that I didn't know what I was missing until I found it. So I was already in fifth gear by the time I was diagnosed. I was at the top of my game. I had already completed a number of marathons and Ironman triathlons, and I felt pretty invincible, to be honest with you, between us. I really did.
Yeah. Absolutely. I can completely understand that. So tell us a little bit about, obviously, cancer was the last thing on your mind. Tell us about that moment and that period of time in your life. How did you learn that you had CLL?
Well, I was actually having some problems swallowing that led, doctor's appointments, doctor phone calls, doctor phoning in prescriptions of an antibiotic and a steroid and trying to figure out what's going on with my throat. Was it an infection? Was it whatever? And then that progressed, or digressed, I guess. Whatever, it got worse. My problems with swallowing went from food to liquids to just saliva. I had all kinds of problems. It felt like a blockage, basically.
Yeah.
So I was referred to an ear, nose, and throat specialist who took one look in my throat, and understand at 45 years old, I still had my tonsils, and now at 65 years old, I still have my tonsils. So they took one look in my throat and said, "Oh gosh, they have to come out." That they assumed that was the root of all evil, and that was giving me the cause for all the problem swallowing. So it was the pre-admission blood work leading into a tonsillectomy that revealed an extremely elevated white count. So then the ENT physician refers me out to an oncologist, which I didn't have, but we scrambled to find. And it was that first meeting that had me scratching my head thinking, okay, I don't know this man from Adam, but clearly he's looking at the wrong chart. Something is askew. This
can't be
me, right? It was a classic denial move, and you hear about that all the time. But I just thought, life's good. We were raising our two daughters. We just felt as though we had, everybody struggles and everyone has hurdles, but not like this. This just felt like, this isn't right.
Yeah.
For a while, I wanted to just go like this and say, nope, you're looking at the wrong chart. That's
Yeah.
just
A
let's
definition of
revisit this. Let's
denial
think
for
about it.
sure.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%.
So talk a little bit about what your treatment journey looked like with this doctor that, you met for the first time while he was
Yeah,
telling you really that you had cancer.
yeah. Well, it's still happening. Like my
Yeah.
treatment is ongoing, but I will say initially, a lot of times with CLL, physicians will recommend the watch and wait
Mm.
method, right? The plan to watch and wait, where symptoms haven't bubbled up to the point of being a major deterrent in your daily life. It doesn't hasn't risen to the point of needing to take any action. With me, the way it had skewed my blood counts and the way I was having trouble swallowing, and then the subsequent additional diagnostics that showed my whole lymphatic system was lit up, not just the tonsils,
Mm.
but everything that we couldn't see was also extremely enlarged. So I needed to start
Right.
treatment right away. And it was a pretty conventional standard protocol of an aggressive traditional chemo along with a monoclonal antibody. And I went through 4 cycles of that, which was a week on, 3 weeks off, week on, 3 weeks off. And then every 6 months, I went back for a little bit of a booster dose of one of the drugs. And that lasted me for quite some time, kept me in remission.
Mm.
Um, but it didn't last
Very,
forever, right?
yeah,
So along the way, we've had to make some course corrections and some
yeah.
change in some medication, and adapt along the way, which is kind of the nature of the beast.
How did your treatment and just your diagnosis in general impact that person you were before in terms of just that athlete and that person that was always on the go? How did you adapt?
Difficultly at first. I wasn't ready to hear that. I wasn't ready
Yeah.
to hear a physician whom I liked. I don't want to paint the wrong, we have since formed a great relationship and
Yeah.
we got along really well. But when a relative stranger tells you that at second meeting, you scratch your head a little bit, and you're thinking something's not right.
Yeah.
Um, so it took me a while to wrap my head around it, and I was more fear of losing that person before I could kind of dust myself off, take a deep breath, and figure out, okay, how do I navigate through and around this versus pretending I don't have it or remaining in
Right.
denial or
Yeah.
feeling sorry for myself. So that was really it took me some time, and it took a very key conversation with 2 different people as I was diagnosed and as they were planning out the treatment protocol that helped me keep myself sane and gave me hope and inspiration for what the future might hold.
Were they also CLL patients or
No, one was
no?
actually my physician,
Okay.
right? So this same physician said to me, first he said that we should give my hobbies and lifestyle a break until we sort through all of this stuff.
Yeah.
That didn't sit well with me because I thought,
Right.
okay, now we're going to take away the one thing that's giving me joy and the one thing that's going to help me to get through
Right.
this. So he said, all right, we'll meet in the middle. I need you to listen to your body, and I need you to do something that you've probably never done before. And that's, if you're not feeling like a workout, you have to just scratch it for the day. If you think you're
Hmm.
going to do a 10-mile run and 10 minutes into it, you feel horrible, guess what? Your body's telling you something. So
Yeah.
we laid out the groundwork, right? He wanted me to stay away from crowded pools. He wanted me to stay away
Yeah.
from crowded gyms, all of which are basically petri dishes for germs and bacteria. And so I figured out a way to navigate that and work out outside, work out on my own, work out at home, do the things that I could still do that would excite me and give me joy and make me
Yeah.
feel like I was in control without putting myself at any further risk. So that was the first conversation. The second conversation was actually with a race director friend who was a doctor as well. And I was giving him copies of my blood work to kind of run through his people and make sure that we were all aligned on what the what the path forward was, what the plan
So
was.
kind of like a second opinion.
Exactly. It was actually
Yeah.
the third opinion because I had gotten another one in between those two. But
Yeah, absolutely.
he was my, so the first two opinions were pure medical opinions.
Yeah.
This third opinion was from a holistic humanitarian triathlete, father, dad, person
Yeah.
perspective.
And person who really knew you.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Knew me, knew my lifestyle. And I was actually registered for his event months later
Hmm.
that same year. He's the one who kind of reassured me that, look, your prognosis looks okay. Your treatment protocol looks very standard. You're a healthy guy. You're going into this thing very strong and healthy. Don't rule anything out. Don't assume that you're not going to be racing in the near midterm or whatever it might be.
Mhm.
So just hearing those two things made me feel like, all right, let me redirect and let me do this. Let me control the things that I can do. Let me try to stay on track where I can, and
Yeah.
hope for the best in terms of the future of racing.
The Ironman training and the Ironman process, there's such preparation that comes with that. And you develop an endurance training mindset um, as you are preparing for these things. Did any of those skills that you developed being an Ironman athlete translate into how you approached your cancer journey?
1000%.
Mm.
No doubt in my mind. So if you think about some of the longer distance racing that I've done through the years, and that mindset, if you were to, before you even embarked on a training plan, if you were to look at what would be involved in a training for a full distance Ironman triathlon, which is a 2.4 mile swim, 112-mile bike, and a 26.2 mile full marathon.
Okay.
If you were to look at that training package before you started, end to end, you're going to lose your mind, right? That's a
Right.
lot.
It's so
That's a lot to
overwhelming.
process. That's very,
Mm.
very overwhelming. So is a diagnosis. But
Yeah.
when you put it all out on a roadmap, right? When you look at,
Mm.
I'm not doing all this training in 1 month, right? This is spread out over 9 to 12 months.
Hmm.
And you look at what's your protocol for your treatment. You don't have to have it all figured out on day one.
Yeah.
What you need to do is make sure you've spoken to the right people, you've got the right plan, you know what you're doing, you know where you're going, and you know what has to happen, right? And as long as you can get through those kind of little hurdles and little
One
benchmarks
day at a
along,
time.
yes, 100%. And then you really celebrate those little milestones. It's exactly the same mindset. And I don't care if it's disease management or any kind of crisis management or relationships or what anger management, whatever it might be. I think if you just employ that same type of thinking, um, it can really help you get through just about anything.
Yeah, I like that. Looking at every day like you were training for an Ironman,
Yep,
every day is getting you toward that goal line and just
that's
focusing
right.
on
Yep.
that's what I can control is what happens today. Um,
And things go awry.
sure.
You control the things that you can control, but there's inevitably, it's just like if you're using the training example, you did everything right. You get through a good swim and now you're out on the bike and you get a flat tire. Right?
Right.
Well,
Yeah.
what can you do about that? Well, what you can do about it is make sure you know how to change your own flat tires before you even go into a race like that. So it's little things like controlling your own destiny, the things that you can control, and then just being able to deflect, redirect, adapt as needed with the little hurdles that might come your way.
Did you have anyone in your life during your treatment journey that had walked the CLL path before that you could go to and ask questions of, or were you really relying more on your physician to give you that guidance?
I didn't really, I had no idea what this was. I
Yeah.
didn't know anyone with the disease. I made the critical mistake of coming home from that first appointment and playing Dr. Google and looking
Ah.
up some things. And that's the first thing I will tell
Yes,
all of your
put the
listeners.
phone away.
Please Yeah, please don't do that. So I was reliant, and he eventually then gave me some good trusted resources like
Mm-hmm.
CLL Society, like Leukemia and Lymphoma Society, American Cancer Society, good places, trusted places that I could go to for some additional information and not just do blind searches. So that's how I found my way, and then that led me to some great patient support groups and some, one-on-one counseling and mentoring and things like that. But I didn't have a clue. I didn't
Yeah.
even understand what the three words meant, chronic lymphocytic leukemia.
Right.
I had to have
Or be
them.
able to say them.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So now, today, I mean, you're heavily involved with the CLL Society and many other groups, and you're providing something that you didn't have in that journey, which is really that survivor by your side, someone who truly understands what they're going through. So, talk a little bit about your engagement with the CLL Society.
Yeah, so that was one organization that I found relatively early, and I was
Mhm.
drawn to them. I was impressed by them because they were not so large that you felt lost.
Mm.
They were small enough to be attentive,
Yeah.
but knowledgeable and resourceful enough that it had great support programs. It had great knowledge, like their
Yeah.
websites and their information and their podcasts and everything is just spot on, and it makes you feel like you're heard. It makes you
Yeah.
feel like you're not
You're not
alone.
alone.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And I've found that with a couple of different organizations, and then since I was still out there doing my thing and still actively racing and training, and people just seem to find me. People seem
Mm.
to say, "Hey, I have a friend who was diagnosed with CLL, or I know somebody who was. Would you mind talking to them?" And that's kind of how it
Yeah.
all started.
You become a
And
magnet.
yeah, and I love that. And to this day, I I get way more satisfaction out of having those conversations, I think, than
Yeah.
I ever give to anyone. Because I just feel as though, hey, if I'm giving somebody an ounce of hope, just by explaining my journey, my situation, obviously I'm not the physician, and I can't tell you how your story is going to end. But what I can tell you is some of the things I did along the way that helped me cope, some of the
Yeah.
adjustments I needed to make, some of the things that I didn't want to adjust or sell out, and it's been a really wonderful journey for me on all sides, and that's a crazy thing to say about a cancer diagnosis, but that's the way it's been.
Right. Well, that's one thing that we ask our survivors and caregivers that become volunteers with us. We ask them what the gift of cancer was in their life. And sometimes at first it's kind of like, what in the world? The gift of cancer.
Yeah,
But I think you understand what that means. So, what was the gift of cancer, or has the gift of cancer been for you?
I think when someone first gets a cancer diagnosis or hears of a cancer diagnosis, I think the first thing they think of is that they're going to lose something. They're going to lose
Mm.
some of their self. They're going to lose opportunities. Doors are going to close. They're not going to be the same person. And I found the exact opposite to be true.
Mm.
I found way more doors opened than closed
Yeah.
with my diagnosis, and way more opportunities were created than taken away. And it's in the people that I meet, it's in the
Yeah. The
organizations that I'm
community.
partnered with. Yes, this community is so strong, and it's necessary for patients to have that amongst each other,
Yeah.
and that's been just one of the most wonderful things that I've been able to find through my journey. I, it's a gift. It's been a gift, and I feel like I've been chosen for a lot of reasons to do something positive
Yeah.
with this. Hey, I could sit on the couch and feel sorry for myself and not do anything positive or proactive, which will do nothing but depress me and won't
Right.
benefit anyone else. Or I can flip the tables, turn the disease on its head, and just try to be as much of a voice as I can. And that's the route that I chose, and it all comes down to a choice.
And thank you for it. Many have been impacted because of that want to help others. So, for those listening There may be someone listening that has just received a CLL diagnosis. What advice would you give them?
Well, stay off of Dr. Google first.
Yes.
The first thing I think is to just take a calming deep breath, because you can get so overwhelmed with the initial news that you don't hear anything that comes after that, right? It's always good to have someone else in the office with you, either to take notes or to help you recall or to help just keep the conversation flowing with questions that you might have of your physician. But the thing is to just make sure you're asking the questions that come up and asking your physician. I belong to a number of patient support groups, chats, teams, whatever the platform might be. And I see so many crazy questions of newly diagnosed people just posing a question to the internet universe on a CLL page. And I'm scratching my head thinking, why would you go ask your doctor that question? Because everyone kind of thinks the same way, and so many people have the same questions, and they just don't know what to do with it, right? You need to find yourself the doctor that's going to have your best interest at heart. And if you don't have that doctor, it's time to shop around for another doctor.
Go find them. Yep.
They're out there. Organizations like CLL Society will help put you in touch with a physician that's in your geographical area, or someone that can help you navigate these waters. So that's the first and foremost, I think, is to just make sure you're asking the questions and having the conversations and speaking openly and honestly to your doctor at every appointment. Don't feel as though I'm the victim, I have cancer, that my doctor's going to tell me everything. His words are gospel and nothing else matters. It's not. It's a two-way collaborative communication process, right? And patients should be empowered, and patients should have a strong hand in decisioning and in questioning, conversation, and everything that goes into their treatment. And if you're not getting that, find somebody else, because that's the key to a successful outcome.
Absolutely. Well, Stephen, if you could leave our listeners with one message of hope, what would it be?
I would like to steer listeners to my 4 favorite keys, or my 4 guideposts that have helped me through many things. And if people can just take a deep breath and take a pause, those 4 words are feet, choice, chocolate, and movement. And using those 4 topics as kind of dials on your dashboard, it's going to keep you positive. It's going to keep you dialed in. It's going to keep you within the right mindset. And simply put, those 4 things mean: feet, just staying present and staying grounded. You can't obsess and stress too much about what's back there or what's ahead of you. Choices, again, make sure you're asking the right questions of the right people. You have decisions to make them collaboratively where necessary. Chocolate, and by that I don't mean Hershey's candy bars. I just mean continuing to do the things that feed your emotional sweet tooth, that make you happy, that feed your soul. Continuing to find a way to feed that emotional sweet tooth, because there are ways and things that you can do, even though you're going through treatment, going through diagnosis, that can keep you grounded, and that's very important. And then last, certainly not least, because it's my favorite, is movement, right? I mean, that's the cornerstone for all of our health. I mean, diet and movement. If we have to keep moving, I hear all the time people are fatigued, they're too tired, they don't want to get off the couch. How do we get around that? And it's counterintuitive, but the way you get around that is to just do what you just said you can't do, right? You have to get up, you have to move. And
it creates energy.
I don't care if you're walking slow laps in the living room. I don't care what you're doing, if you're doing chair yoga, but you have to move, right? You have to work your body and move a little bit. You don't have to run marathons, but you do have to move.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that advice and just sharing your story with us today. I know it will be a blessing to so many. And if you are facing cancer today, or your loved loved one is facing cancer today, CanCare is here to support you. We'd love for you to reach out. And if you'd like to join us as a volunteer, you can go to cancare.org to sign up. Please like and follow this podcast for more episodes of Hope in the Face of Cancer. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Hope in the Face of Cancer, a survivor by your side. If you or someone you know is facing cancer or is supporting a loved one through their journey, we invite you to share this podcast. Thank you for your support in our efforts in the cancer community. No one should face cancer alone.